My twin sister, Samantha, was such a wuss. She was afraid of everything. Spiders, cats, raindrops on the roof late at night, and I think that even her own shadow made her jump sometimes. We were almost identical except for the fact that I'm a boy and she's a girl. However, we had completely different personalities. She was really smart and our parents' perfect child. I was the lazy one. I preferred to play games and sports rather than study. Our biggest difference was that while Samantha was afraid of everything, I feared nothing. I always believed that I was ordinary until one day I sat and reflected on my life and my past experiences. Before I tell you about those, please don't forget to hit that notification bell, like the video, and subscribe to our channel. When Samantha and I were about 4 years old, my dad became obsessed with his new hobby. He'd follow us around with his camcorder and try to get shots of us doing funny things, but we never did anything too exciting. We'd just play with Legos, eat mud, and do whatever little kids do. Before Halloween that year, he got a bright idea. He decided to set up the camera in the living room so that we couldn't see it. Then, while we were watching our favorite cartoons, he jumped at us while wearing a werewolf costume. My sister jumped, screamed, and ran outside. She was horrified. My first instinct was to save my sister from the scary creature, so I ran to the kitchen and got a huge frying pan. I ran back to the living room and began attacking him with it. Bang, 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 I hit him repeatedly. Ah! My dad shouted when he couldn't take it anymore. It's me, Samuel. It's Dad. I was just trying to play a prank on you guys, he said. I was shocked and wondered why he would attempt to do something so stupid. Serves you right for trying to prank your 4-year-olds, Mom laughed as she walked in on the chaos. Luckily for my dad, the video was a hit. Not because he was able to scare us, but because I attacked him with a frying pan. He sent it to America's Funniest Home Videos, and we actually won $10,000. My mom was very proud of me for beating up my dad. As we continued growing, my sister would find more ridiculous things to be afraid of. Whenever she heard a scary story, she'd be afraid to sleep. She'd call our parents to our room in the middle of the night complaining about monsters under her bed. Wouldn't it be cool if we had monsters in our room, though? I asked her one night. We were only about 8 years old. How would that be cool? They're scary, she said. No, they're not. They're stupid. But at least we'd have some people to talk to. I laughed and fell back asleep. A few months later, Samantha believed that aliens were going to abduct us in our sleep. I always tried to make her think logically. Sis, there are millions of people in the world. Why do you think aliens would be interested in abducting you specifically? Besides, they probably don't exist, and if they did, they're ugly and stupid, I said. My words were never enough to convince her, though. But it wasn't just her. Other people had fears that I just couldn't understand. Sometimes at school, I'd hear my friends talking about things that scared them. In middle school, everyone was terrified of Mr. Higgins, the science teacher. But he sort of reminded me of Professor Snape from Harry Potter, and I laughed every time I saw him. Stop doing that, my best friend Gareth would always say. He's going to kill you. I'm pretty sure that guy is really a vampire, he continued, and I couldn't tell if he was serious or joking. Yes, the guy was boring, extremely strict, and always saying the meanest, most hurtful things to everyone. Everyone avoided him because he was horrible, and my friends couldn't understand why I was laughing while they were trembling. Horror movies were the best, too. My sister couldn't watch them, of course, but sometimes I'd go to the cinema just to watch people's reactions to what they found scary. This was actually more entertaining than the movies themselves. I thought that most of the characters were bad actors. One day, my sister walked in on me while I was laughing at the girl from The Ring. Her hair was just so long and stupid, and I thought she looked like an idiot. I don't understand how you can watch that stuff and just laugh. It's terrifying. Please, turn off the TV, she said, looking like she was about to burst into tears at any moment. I don't understand how you can't watch this stuff. Why are you so scared of everything? You're such a scaredy cat. You really need to toughen up, I replied. I'm not a scaredy cat, she denied. Okay, fine. Prove it to me. Let's make a bet, I said. She looked worried but said, Fine, I'll win anyway. What's the bet? We're going to go to the haunted house in the amusement park. If you can walk with me through the whole thing without screaming or showing any fear at all, I'll do anything you want for a year. I'll clean your room, do your chores, everything, I said. Sounds great, she replied. Yeah, but if I win, and I will, you'll have to do anything I want for a year, I said. She rolled her eyes at me, then nodded. Fine. We didn't tell our parents because they'd be too afraid for Samantha. Because she was always so scared of everything, they always treated her like a delicate china doll. We just told them we were going to a friend's house to play video games. When we reached the park, we paid the admission fee and walked in. "Hey, can we get some cotton candy first?" Samantha asked. "Fine," I shrugged. We filled our stomachs with sweets and all sorts of junk food. Then she wanted me to win her a huge stuffed animal. I tried, but I couldn't. "Let's just come back after we leave the haunted house. You'll need something to hug anyway. You're going to be so scared," I laughed at her. She agreed hesitantly, and we walked over to the haunted house. It was bigger than the ordinary haunted houses you may have seen at carnivals. A haunted mansion would probably be more accurate. There were over 50 rooms, each with something new and more terrifying than the last room. Before exiting, we'd have to go through all the rooms. As we walked through the door, I held Samantha's hand, but she pulled away. "I'm not a baby, Samuel. I told you I'm not going to be scared tonight," she said. We were surrounded by darkness, but we could see flashing red lights all around the room. We heard a loud scream and felt something grabbing our legs. I found it all funny. "Ooh, that tickles," I laughed while trying to hear Samantha's reaction, but she didn't flinch. This was very unusual. I was expecting her to have to run out the door by now. We pulled our legs away from whatever had been grabbing them and walked into the next room, which was covered with skeletons and shrunken heads. There were lights flashing in every direction and spooky music playing in the background. I wasn't impressed. The next room was covered with mirrors. We began looking at ourselves and making funny faces when we were ambushed by people dressed like zombies. I looked at Samantha, who looked a bit worried, like she was trying to hide all her fear, but she didn't scream or show much emotion. I was starting to believe that she'd win our bet after all. When the zombies realized we weren't paying attention to them, they let us proceed to the next room, which was covered in blood. "It's just red Kool-Aid or ketchup, don't worry," I said to Samantha. Then I remembered I wanted her to be scared. "Oh my God, no, it's blood. It's real blood, Samantha," I said. "Would you shut up? How many more rooms are there?" she said. About 47, I replied. We walked in and out of a few more rooms. I was starting to get bored. Samantha was showing no emotion at all, and that was pretty weird. We reached a black and white striped room filled with odd-looking mimes who surrounded us and pretended that we were in a box. Suddenly, the room became dark. It was pitch black and I couldn't see a thing. I tried reaching for Samantha to check if she was okay. Then, my heart jumped into my mouth. I heard a horrifying, high-pitched scream. "Samuel, help me!" I heard my sister shouting. It sounded like she was struggling and that someone was carrying her away. I tried running in that direction of the noise, but I ended up running straight into a wall. I fell down, hurt. I got up quickly and tried to follow Samantha's sounds, but it was almost like I was in a maze. When I got out of the room, I looked around the dimly lit corridor. "Samantha? Samantha!" I shouted, but I heard nothing. A woman dressed like a witch approached me and tried to scare me. I grabbed her shoulders and screamed, "My sister! Where have you taken my sister?" "We have boiled her in our cauldron," she laughed. I could have slapped her. My sister was missing and she was trying to be funny. I ran in the opposite direction, continuing to scream my sister's name, but I had no luck. I think I searched every single room in that pathetic haunted house. I navigated through mummies, vampires, more witches, zombies, bats, spiders, and everything else people who felt fear were afraid of. My heart was pounding. I left the haunted house and went to the admissions booth. "Excuse me, sir, I think something's happened to my sister," I said. "Yeah, it's a haunted house. Something happens to everyone," he shrugged indifferently. I began to panic even more. I ran around the entire amusement park looking for Samantha, but there were just too many people, and there was so much going on that it was all a huge blur. I had no idea what to do. I thought of calling the police, but I had left my cell phone at home. I could have probably used a stranger's phone, but I was so worried that the thought didn't even cross my mind. I decided to run home to my parents. I ran for about 10 minutes straight, then burst through my front door. "Dad, Mom, someone took Samantha!" I screamed. My mom and dad came running towards me. "What do you mean? Weren't you at a friend's house?" my mom asked. "No, we went to a haunted house at an amusement park, and in the middle of it all, someone took Samantha away. She was screaming. I looked everywhere for her. I didn't know what else to do, so I came back here," I said while trying not to burst into tears. "Don't cry, sweetie," my mom said. "Don't cry? We have to find Samantha. I'm so afraid," I said. "What did you say?" said my dad. "I said I'm afraid. Anything could be happening to her right now." Suddenly, a camera crew popped out of the next room. Walking behind them was my sister. I couldn't believe it. She was okay. "Smile, you're on candid camera," she laughed. "Well, not exactly, but this will be great for my YouTube channel. You finally admitted that you were afraid," my dad said. "Was this all a trick so you could try to make another viral video, Dad?" I asked, half angry and half relieved that my sister was okay. "I think so. This will blow up," my dad replied. "Yeah, and we really needed to see if you could be afraid of something ever," said Samantha. I sat down and buried my head in my hands. I had been tricked. But I was also able to experience fear for one of the first times in my life. It turns out that ordinary things don't scare me at all, but the thought of losing the ones I love is the most terrifying of all. So in the end, I did feel horror after all. Hi, I'm Ryan, and I have a rare disorder. I don't feel pain. I didn't always know this though. Here's how it all started. My parents thought I was the most perfect baby in the world. Why? I rarely ever cried. I was laughing most of the time and only broke into tears when I was hungry or needed my diaper changed. My parents' friends who also had babies were so envious that my parents were able to get a full 8 hours of sleep each night. One funny story that my dad tells everyone over dinner is that when I was a toddler, I was playing in the dirt outside. He heard me laughing uncontrollably, so he came to see what could have been so amusing about a pile of dirt. When he looked at me, he gasped. I had a huge scorpion in my hands, and I was just playing with it like it was a teddy bear. He also says I had a huge red mark on my leg where it had stung me. He screamed at me to drop it, then picked me up and ran into the house. I was still laughing, apparently. My parents took me to the doctor to check if I was okay, and I was. However, no one could understand why I wasn't screaming in pain. Before I continue, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to this channel. And make sure you hit that notification bell for more awesome content like this. I had 2 older brothers who were always pushing each other around, and when I was big enough to play their wrestling and boxing games, they included me too. They were always hitting or punching me, and instead of crying, I just hit and punched back harder. They'd often stop the games because they were in so much pain. I found it all amusing because I felt nothing. When I was about 6, my family and I were on the beach, and my mom got a sea urchin stuck in her foot. She screamed and shouted in pain. Then she burst into tears. My father tried to pull it out, but the more he tried, the more it hurt. I really couldn't understand why it affected my mother so much, so I went into the sea and caught another sea urchin. I dropped it onto the sand and jumped on it. It tickled. "Mom, this is fun. Why are you crying?" I said. "Oh my God, Ryan," she said. We both had urchins stuck in our feet. I was giggling and my mom was crying. My poor dad had to deal with it all. He drove us to the hospital where they helped us to remove the spikes. For my mother, this seemed unbearable, but it didn't affect me at all. And I guess that is when I realized I was a bit different. I decided to use this difference to my advantage. At school, I developed the nickname Fearless because I was always doing the most outrageous stunts. I'd climb to the top of the monkey bars and deliberately throw myself down. Or I'd swing really high, then just jump off midair. One day, I brought a lighter to school and tried to impress a girl by burning my finger. It was so much fun. But I have to warn you, don't try any of this at home, or anywhere for that matter. I got into trouble for this because eventually the other kids wanted to attempt my stunts. When they did, they'd end up in excruciating pain with broken limbs. It got so bad that my parents were called into a meeting and I was expelled for being a bad influence. At my new school, I became a bully because I was angry that those stupid boys from my other school got me in trouble. I became the most feared boy at school, and people would think twice before crossing my path. The bigger boys in the higher grades tried to mess with me once, but I beat them up so badly that they learned to stay away from me. They were so shocked when I only laughed at them while they punched and kicked me. I have to admit that part of me really loved the attention and respect. I would do things just for the thrill and attention. For example, one afternoon, my parents decided they'd take us kids out to enjoy a cool stroll in the zoo. After laughing at the penguins and observing the zebras, I began to feel a bit bored. As we approached the lion's pit, I got a bright idea. Ryan, no!" my mom screamed. but it was too late. I had already jumped in. I walked around making funny faces at the lions while the crowd screamed for me to get out. Many people had already taken out their phones and they were recording. I ignored them because there was a cute little lion cub approaching me. I ran towards it and picked it up. Suddenly, I heard more shouting. "Ryan, look out!" my dad said. Before I could even turn around, a lioness, the cub's mother I guess, jumped on my back and bit my arm. I turned around and pried her jaws apart with my bare arms. Then I laughed and hopped out of the lion's pit. I was bleeding, but I seemed totally unbothered by the whole incident. I went viral that same afternoon. Everyone was talking about me. In the weeks that followed, I became so popular that I was invited by several talk show hosts to talk on their shows. It was all the attention I'd been craving, and more. As a teenager, I continued participating in extreme sports. I got tired of the bully reputation, so when I moved to high school, I hung out with the tough kids who were also into extreme sports. We called ourselves the Daredevils, and every other week we'd try a different challenge. We went mountain biking, paragliding, skydiving, and base jumping, but my ultimate favorite was cliff diving. I loved the adrenaline rush I'd get while falling through the air and then crashing on the sea. Unlike my friends, I had absolutely no fear. One afternoon on one of our cliff diving adventures, I had an experience that influenced the rest of my life. It was just like any ordinary day, but while making silly gestures on a cliff, I ended up losing my balance. Instead of falling into the sea, I hit the rocks and I ended up breaking both my arm and my leg. I only knew this because this is what the x-rays at the hospital revealed. I felt completely fine. Luckily, my problem could be easily fixed, but the doctors were extremely puzzled about why I seemed to feel no pain at all. Although I could have been discharged earlier, they decided to keep me longer. Several tests were conducted, and after that, they did several more. After what seemed like weeks, they called me and my parents to a meeting. Many doctors were present, and everyone looked at me like I was some sort of alien. The head doctor looked at my parents and said, "This is something we've never seen before at our hospital. Your son Ryan is incapable of feeling pain," he said. "What?" my dad said. "Think about the way he has behaved his whole life. I'm pretty sure there were many clear indicators, but now that we've done the tests, we know for sure," replied the doctor. "Well, there was the scorpion sting when he was a baby, and he never cried when his brothers hit him, and he'd do all kinds of crazy stunts in elementary school. Then the lion." My dad went blank for a while, and then it all clicked. "Well, Ryan needs to be extremely careful because he is unable to feel pain. He seems to constantly put himself in life-threatening situations. He will do things that ordinary humans would probably think twice about attempting. Think about it. He could have killed himself while jumping off that cliff," he said. "Our suggestion is that he stops engaging in dangerous sports. Can you just calm down and behave like a normal young man for a while?" he said while looking at me. "I don't really care what any of you have to say," I said while walking out of the room and slamming the door. I was angry. How dare they all talk about me like that while I was right in the room? I loved my life, and I loved the adrenaline rush I felt when I took risks. I wasn't about to put myself in a bubble just because I couldn't feel pain. Instead of persuading me to be careful, the doctor's revelation caused me to feel like I was superior to everyone else. I decided to use my ability to make money. I started making videos while I hurt myself to see if I could get lots of views on YouTube. I did everything I could think of. I stuck needles in my hands, smashed bricks on my head, and one time I even set myself on fire. People were horrified, but I found it hilarious. I gained more and more views and more followers. When I finally hit 1 million, I felt the greatest sense of accomplishment I had ever felt in my life. I also continued my dangerous stunts, and when I was old enough to drive, I did every single thing I was told not to do in driving school. I also bought a motorbike, which became my favorite thing in the universe. I learned how to do many stunts, and of course, I did them all without a helmet. This was the worst mistake, and maybe I should have cared and listened to my mom when she begged me to wear it. One night, while I was biking through the mountains and testing out some stunts all by myself, my lights stopped working. It didn't bother me much, but I decided I should try to head back home. I went speeding through the mountains back to the town. I really enjoyed feeling the breeze through my hair. I didn't think that speeding was a bad idea because these roads were usually clear at night. Suddenly, I saw a bright white light and heard a huge bang. Then, everything went black. I woke up to a masked face staring directly at me. I looked around and realized I was in an operating room. I looked at my body and realized I had many cuts all over. The surgeons were trying to stitch me back together and it looked really gross. I didn't feel anything, but just seeing myself like that really upset me. I was given a few sleeping pills, and when I woke up hours later, my parents were sitting by my side. "Oh, Ryan, my love, what have you done to yourself now?" my mom said while wiping the tears off her face. "What do you mean, Mom? I just feel a bit drowsy, but I'm perfectly fine," I said while trying to sit up. But I couldn't move. I tried and tried again, but nothing worked. "What happened to me?" I asked. "You were in a really horrible accident. You were paralyzed from the waist down, and you might be confined to a wheelchair for the next 3 years, honey," my mom said. "But that can't be. I didn't feel anything," I said, shocked. At that moment, the doctor walked in. "Although you don't feel anything, you have badly injured yourself. Your body needs time to heal. After 2 or 3 years, we'll get started with the physical therapy to help you walk again. But you will never be the same. I'm sorry," he said. I sighed and thought that I should have listened to them when they asked me to be more careful. I was filled with regrets. I now have 1 year left to go, and I'm really hoping that I'll be able to stand soon. Although I still can't feel pain, I feel humiliated and frustrated like this. I should have made better decisions, and when I get out of this wheelchair, I will stop seeking attention and I will try to be a lot more careful.
You know how scared you get when you are all alone in your room and you hear something go bump in the night? Or when you are about to bungee jump right at the edge of a cliff? Or maybe even that sick feeling at the pit of your stomach before a big exam. I bet you have these kinds of fears many times in your life. Well, the thing is, I have never felt fear at all. Not once in my life. Not when I was a baby, not when I was a toddler, and certainly not as a kid or teenager. My name is Krista, and believe it or not, I was born without the ability to experience fear. Sounds insane, right? You're damned right it does. My mom usually tells me about when I was a little baby. Back then, Krista, you never ever cried. I thought I had the quietest baby in the world. But the moment you began crawling, I couldn't let you alone for 1 second. You would dare do things no other child your age would. But before we move on, like this video, hit that subscribe button, and activate the notification bell. This will let you live 20 amazing years longer. Trust me, it works. I never called for her, never shied away from a big dog, tried to climb on every surface I could. I would try to drink shiny liquids, and of course, those came from the cleaning cabinet. Imagine how many times my mom had to rush behind me, stopping me from hurting myself. Now, don't think that I never got hurt. I harmed myself plenty of times, believe me, and it hurt like hell. Fear and pain have nothing to do with one another. The thing is, I never connect those two things together until it's way too late. My parents, of course, took me to see lots of doctors and specialists. They run so many tests on me trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with me. They'd hook me up to these machines and play pictures and movies for me and measure my brain's reaction to it all. Apparently, as the doctors explained to my parents, the part of my brain that experienced fear simply wasn't active. Was Krista dropped on her head as a baby? One doctor asked. And this got my mom feeling awful about her parenting. She hadn't, but it got her thinking, what if she had done something to stun that part of my brain? What if it was her fault after all? She began crying, and I felt awful about it. I got super mad at the doctor and told him off. So you can imagine that we had to leave that hospital pretty soon. It wasn't a nice day, but I don't regret standing up to that doctor for my mom. My parents, both my mother and father, were amazing toward me. And they were so patient, they didn't deserve to be pointed out as irresponsible or anything of the sort. I was just different. That was it. We never did discover why that part of my brain never worked. And when my parents tried to find out if there was a surgery that could fix me, the answer was almost always no. Some doctors did theorize it was possible, but the risks would be too high, and I could end up with long-term damage. It simply wasn't worth the risk. I hate watching scary movies, believe me. It's so annoying. I sit there, bored to death, while other people scream and squirm and cover their eyes. I just sigh and get super bored. The monsters are never scary to me, and the killers seem so foolish. I don't enjoy scary stories around the bonfires either, so I wasn't into camping with other kids. Do you know what else I never got to enjoy? Roller coasters or any other activity that produces adrenaline for the sake of fun. Nothing happens to me there. I just sit and get super bored of hearing people scream and flinch. It's super annoying, and people wonder what is going on with me. Believe me, if I had a penny for every time I heard someone ask, "What the hell is wrong with you?" I'd have a fortune. It was almost inevitable I began hanging out with the daredevil crowds when I started going to high school. I think that I was trying to finally get that thrill I had never experienced before. They pushed me to try crazier and crazier stunts, and the danger levels kept raising every single time. My mom would freak out so badly. She begged me not to do it anymore at first. Then she scolded me. Then she grounded me. God, she tried everything, the poor woman. Krista, honey, you need to understand. You can't feel fear, yes, but you can get hurt. And you do so often. How many times have you been to the hospital? People will think I'm a terrible mom. When you are about to do something, stop and think if I would do it. If the answer is no, then don't do it. Mom would try to reason with me like this. And in theory, it sounded cool. I mean, I could just stop and think if mom would do it or not. But in practice, I never got to that moment. It was only later that I realized how much I had messed up. I can't even tell you how many times I got home with my jeans ripped, with scrapes and bruises, or far worse. My friends got me really into parkour, and we would go to the park and try these crazy stunts all the time. It was really fun. They would dare each other to do these insane moves, and I was the only one who always accepted it, no matter how crazy. I was a kid doing stuff no other daredevil dare try, so you can imagine how bad it got before long. I actually broke my arm 3 times, my right ankle once, and my left ankle twice. I had to go to the emergency room so many times, and I even had to visit a physical therapist twice a week for like a year. It got really bad, and my parents were super worried about me. Something else that I could do so easily while my friends really struggled with was asking guys out. I never ever had a problem with that. The girls I hung out with would wait and wait and wait for the man they liked to ask them out on dates. They were too shy or too afraid of rejection to take the first step. I never cared at all if I was told no. I just walked up to a cute guy, grinned at him, and then asked, "Hey, would you like to go out with me tonight?" Plain and simple. Some guys even looked a bit stunned that I was so straightforward. Honestly, I rarely got told no. Most of them said yes, either because they liked me or because they were impressed by my boldness and wanted to give me a try. It was really fun not to be waiting around for someone to take me out on a fun date out, you know? So at least there was a good side of never experiencing any fear. I was the very first one of my friends to get a date to homecoming, and it was because I just walked up to him, the dreamiest guy at school, and asked him to go with me. It was expected he would ask the head cheerleader to go with him, but he was impressed by my attitude and instead decided to go with me. We ended up dating for an entire year, though it didn't work out in the end. We are still friends, though. He's a pretty cool guy. In college, I met Gavin, the most amazing guy I had ever known. He wasn't only handsome, but so damn smart and witty. He made me laugh every single day. And when he discovered I couldn't experience any fear, Gavin made it his life's mission to try and scare me shitless. He tried so hard, the poor thing, but nothing ever worked. We soon began dating, and he would come up with super creative ways of making me finally experience fear. He'd jump out from dark places and scream at me. He'd hide underneath my bed and wait till I laid down to grab my hand. He even waited in the parking lot, dressed as a big monster, and tried chasing me around. Every single time, I just stared at him in a mix of confusion and amusement. He was always so adorably frustrated. I actually thought it was cute. But he got super frustrated. To me, it was fun, and I like that he tried so hard. If I have to be honest, I'd love to know what being afraid feels like. I feel kind of lonely sometimes, like I can't understand an important part of human nature. Some people think I'm a freak, and who knows, maybe I am. The problem is, experiencing no fear can always put you in truly dangerous situations. Let me tell you about the time I almost got stabbed because of my problem. You see, I was just walking through the park late one night. Of course, a normal girl might not do something like that, but I didn't really feel any kind of fear about it. Suddenly, a guy sitting on a bench called me over. He had ragged clothes and looked dirty and disheveled, but he didn't really seem like a danger to me. So, not feeling that instinctual panic anyone else would in those circumstances, I walked over to him, and then the man pulled a knife on me. "Give me all the money you have or I'll cut you," he threatened, expecting me to do as I was told due to fear of being harmed. Instead, I just stared at him blankly and shook my head almost nonchalantly. "No way, dude, I'm not giving you my money," I told him, clearly shocking him. The guy stabbed at me and I jumped out of the way. I realized it was a dangerous situation, so I did try to get away from there, but it wasn't because I was afraid or anything of the sort. Instead of following behind me, the guy just ran the other way as well. He was the one who seemed to be scared. I'm sure that he had never encountered anyone like me before. When I told my boyfriend and my parents about it, they really freaked out. That's exactly what they had been worried about for so long that would happen to me. What if the next time the robber did harm me? Well, thankfully, it's never happened again. And I do try to avoid dark places when I'm alone now. Mom begged me enough that I gave her my word, and I don't like breaking the promises I make. Gavin and I are still together to this day. He is amazing, even if he kind of annoys everyone around us with his constant attempts to scare me. Usually, what he achieves is to startle someone else in the process. My mom scolded him so badly one time that he stopped pulling those pranks whenever she was visiting. I really don't mind though. To me, it's kind of adorable and fun. I'm probably never going to be able to experience any kind of fear, but by now I've sort of accepted it as a part of me, just like the fact that I'm a brunette and have freckles. So that's my story. Thank you for watching. What would you do if you suddenly could no longer experience any kind of fear? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.
Hi, my name is Lenny, and I know this will sound crazy, but I actually am unable to feel pain. This might sound like an amazing trait, but it can be really dangerous. Let me tell you my story. When I was a little kid, I didn't know that I was different from other children my age. I would watch TV shows and movies and get so confused whenever I saw someone getting hurt. They would cry in pain or sob or something, and I didn't understand what was happening to them. You see, I was born with a rare condition that basically eradicated all the receptors in my brain. The doctors aren't sure if I was born without them or if they were destroyed, but back then I didn't know any of that. I just thought people were weird. I've never experienced pain, and so I can't even relate to it. The very idea of something hurting is foreign to me. Imagine growing up not knowing what pain feels like, or even understanding how it works. I remember a kid falling down in class one day and bumping his head against the desk. He cried and was sent to the nurse's office. I was so confused and everyone looked so worried. Why did the kid sob like that? Why was he holding his head and saying it ached? I had bumped my head plenty of times, and I had felt, well, nothing at all. I wanted to ask the teacher about it, but then I suddenly realized, what if I was the one that was weird? What if there was something wrong with me and my classmates made fun of me? So I decided to remain silent and pretend I was worried too. It wasn't too hard because I was worried, but not about the kid's pain. I was worried someone would realize I was different, but no one even looked at me. I decided it was best to just stay quiet about it and move on with my life. Surely I would also feel that thing called pain one day. If everyone suffered it, I was going to as well one day, right? Well, no, I wouldn't, and I would discover it in a rather dramatic fashion. My parents had no idea I was unique. They just thought I was a really resilient kid. Mom was so proud that I was so brave when I had my shots or when I scraped my knees. She would tell other mothers how I wouldn't even flinch when the nurse came close to me with a big needle. Little did she know that I wasn't afraid because I had no idea what pain actually was. If something couldn't hurt me, why would I be worried about it? And so my mom and dad didn't notice my condition for the first few years of my life. It wasn't until I had my first big accident that everything changed. It all happened so fast. No one was to blame for the accident, but it was still really scary, or so my parents tell me. The truth is, I wasn't afraid at all. I was playing at the playground after lunch one day. Mom had insisted we go to the park so I wouldn't spend all day long glued to the TV. I was really excited since that meant I'd be able to run around and be silly. We had been in the playground for a while when I decided to go for the swings. I loved them. It was so much fun to go as high as I could, it felt like I was flying. I remember Mom warned me not to go so high, but I didn't listen. I just chuckled and tried to jump forward. I was planning on landing on my feet neatly, but I messed up. Instead, I landed on my right arm and heard my mom scream a few feet away from me. She later told me I hit the ground really hard, but I didn't feel a thing. I didn't even bat an eye, didn't cry for help, didn't get scared. Mom and Dad saw everything, and they were freaking out. It was clearly hurt, but I didn't react at all. They asked me if I was okay, and I replied that I was fine and if I could go back to play. They were really worried because they saw my arm looked like it was bent the wrong way. Still, I didn't complain or anything. They decided to take me to the ER just in case. You know how sometimes the adrenaline keeps people from feeling pain and then it hits them all at once? Well, that's what my parents figured was happening to me. When a doctor finally got to us, he checked me out and immediately did an x-ray on me. He didn't look too happy, and this concerned my parents. Why was the doctor frowning if I looked like it didn't hurt at all? Surely it couldn't be that bad. It turned out I had a very badly fractured arm. The doctor was in shock that I wasn't complaining or screaming since it was supposed to be a really painful injury. I actually had to undergo surgery to help my arm heal properly. It was that bad. The nurses asked me as I woke up from the anesthesia if something hurt. I just replied that it didn't. The doctor wanted to see if I could really go without painkillers after the surgery. I didn't even feel the difference. The whole staff was fascinated by my case. I didn't take any pain medication during my stay there and felt perfectly okay. In fact, my mom had to threaten to ground me just to keep me in bed. It was important that I lay still for a few days to recover. The problem was I felt just fine and was bored out of my mind. My parents didn't know what to make of it and decided to take me to a specialist. After all, I was supposed to feel pain. What could possibly be wrong with me? It took the doctors several tests to finally figure out what was happening. An MRI image showed a lack of transmitters in my brain that would usually decode pain. Though I technically should be able to feel it, my brain was unable to process and react to it. The doctor said it was an incredibly rare condition and that there were very few documented cases in the world. I was very unique, and honestly, I thought it was really cool. My parents were admittedly very worried, but to me, it was so awesome. With this newfound knowledge, I became incredibly reckless. I was known in the neighborhood as the daredevil kid on the street, and it only got worse as I grew up. I would get into all kinds of problems and always be looking for my next adrenaline fix. I would jump off really high things and do all kinds of dangerous stunts. Teens in my school were always challenging me to try new and weird stuff, and I always took them up on it. I won every single bet and made good money off it. My mom would always check how I was whenever I got home, and she begged me to be more careful. I love my mother to bits, but I had grown too used to being a daredevil to stop. I loved testing my limits. Plus, honestly, I kind of wanted to discover if anything would actually make me feel pain at all. The doctors said it was impossible, but I like experimenting with things for myself. I'll be honest and say I've had a lot of broken limbs over the years, plus many more broken noses and even fingers. I'm okay with that. I just go to the hospital and they patch me up. My mom freaks out every single time. I apologize, but we both know I'll do it all over again soon. Sometimes I don't even realize I have a fracture until someone lets me know I'm walking kind of weird. A lot of my friends got jealous of me over the years, but they still love seeing me perform cool tricks for them. Now, as fun as this all sounds, there is a big problem here. I have no way of knowing if I get hurt or not. It's kind of a mess, especially for someone so reckless as I am. Doing something as simple as running is dangerous because I can't tell if I stepped on something sharp or if I bent my knee or something like that. Each morning when I wake up, I have to check to see if I didn't scratch my body or something. I also have to be really careful when I'm cooking, because if I ever burn or cut myself, I won't feel it at all. Sure, I don't suffer at all, but my body still gets hurt. I could get a really bad burn and have to be hospitalized, all because I'm completely immune to pain. Imagine needing to be super careful about anything you do, and checking yourself in the mirror every few hours. It gets so boring, and I'm not exactly the most patient guy in the world. Sometimes I forget and then suffer the consequences. For instance, I once got a really bad infection, and since I didn't realize anything was wrong, I ended up in the hospital for an entire week. The doctors pumped so many antibiotics into me, and I didn't feel a thing. Another time, I suddenly began feeling super sick. Nothing hurt, of course, but I was rushing to the toilet every 5 minutes. I couldn't retain any liquids, and Mom got really worried. The doctor at the ER at first didn't pay me much attention. He said that most symptoms pointed toward me having appendicitis, but since I wasn't in pain, it was impossible. When my mom explained my condition, he got really worried. They examined me, and apparently my appendix was about to burst. I could have been a goner, and all because I didn't feel a thing. If my mom hadn't been so quick in taking me to see a doctor, it would have been a really big mess. I'm grateful my mother is so protective and helps me constantly, but she can be a bit overwhelming from time to time. From the moment she discovered my condition, she began to act so weirdly. She wanted me to have someone with me at all times, but I refused. I want to grow to be a normal person and have a happy life, even if I can't feel pain. Ever since then, I've tried to be more careful, but honestly, it's still kind of hard. I have a girlfriend now, and she is a lifesaver. She reminds me to check my body for cuts and scrapes and also keeps me from doing foolish stuff. I've also quit doing daredevil stunts, at least for now. I need to learn to listen to my body even if I don't feel any pain. After all, I want to live to be old and maybe even marry the girl I'm dating. She is amazing and shares my sense of adventure. With her by my side, though, I get to enjoy the excitement without actually getting hurt. Thanks for watching. What would you do if you couldn't feel any pain? Let us know in the comments. Please don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos in the channel.